Did the MiG-29 ever fight NATO? There was once a fighter aircraft, born during a time when the world was divided into two opposing powers, the East and the West. It was created for one purpose: to counter the finest fighter aircraft of the United States. It was designed to intercept the F-15 Eagle, to hunt the F-16 Fighting Falcon, and to defend the skies of the Soviet Union. That aircraft was the MiG-29 Fulcrum. Throughout the Cold War, its name generated significant concern within NATO, because at the time, the West knew very little about it. They only knew that this was a new generation fighter aircraft, highly maneuverable, equipped with an infrared search and tracking system, and built specifically to confront Western fighters head-on. But there is one question that continues to be asked even today. Did the MiG-29 ever actually fight NATO? And if it did, what was the outcome? Who survived and who fell from the sky? In this documentary, Eagle War Machine will take you back to real battlefields, from the Persian Gulf to the Kosovo War, to uncover the truth. When the aircraft designed to fight NATO finally faced NATO in actual combat, how did the story end? This is the story of the MiG-29 Fulcrum, the Soviet Hunter, an aircraft once regarded as a potential nightmare for the Western world. But in real combat, did it truly prove itself? Join us as we uncover the answer with Eagle War Machine. To understand how the MiG-29 came to fight NATO, we must first go back to a time when the world feared a major war. In the late 1970s, the United States introduced a new generation of fighter aircraft that immediately caught the attention of the Soviet Union. The first was the F-15 Eagle, an air superiority fighter designed to dominate the skies completely. It could fly higher, fly faster, carry more weapons, and it possessed a radar system of remarkable power. Not long afterward, the F-16 Fighting Falcon appeared, a smaller aircraft but highly maneuverable, extremely responsive, and far less expensive to operate. Suddenly, the Soviet Union realized that older fighters, such as the MiG-21 and MiG-23, might no longer be enough. If a war between NATO and the Soviet Union ever erupted, Soviet pilots could find themselves facing hundreds of F-15 Eagles and thousands of F-16 Fighting Falcons across the skies of Europe. That was the beginning of a secret project that the world would later come to know as the MiG-29 Fulcrum. The Soviet objective was clear. They did not simply want a fast aircraft. They wanted a hunter capable of confronting NATO directly. The MiG-29 was designed with twin engines to improve survivability in combat. It possessed tremendous acceleration for close-range engagements. Its large wings provided exceptional maneuverability and allowed it to turn aggressively in a dogfight. Most importantly, it was equipped with an infrared search and track system, or IRST. At the time, this feature attracted significant attention in the West, because the MiG-29 could detect targets without relying entirely on its radar, which meant that in some situations, NATO pilots might be detected first without even realizing it. When the MiG-29 first appeared, many Western analysts began asking a serious question. Was this the most dangerous opponent NATO had ever encountered? It had been built to fight the F-15, It had been built to fight the F-16, and it had been built to serve as the iron fist of the Soviet Air Force. But there was one thing that nobody truly knew at the time. When this intimidating aircraft finally entered real combat, would it be able to prove itself? And when the MiG-29 eventually faced NATO aircraft in actual battle, would the outcome match Soviet expectations? In the next chapter, we enter a real battlefield, the Gulf War of 1991, the moment when the MiG-29 encountered the F-15 Eagle for the first time, and the world was about to discover whether the Soviet Hunter was truly as formidable as its reputation suggested.
January 17th, 1991. The skies above Iraq were about to become one of the largest aerial battlefields since the end of the Second World War. A U.S.-led coalition launched Operation Desert Storm. Thousands of aircraft took to the skies: F-15 Eagles, F-14 Tomcats, F/A-18 Hornets, Tornadoes, Mirage 2000s, and many other combat aircraft were heading toward Iraq. But on the other side, Iraqi pilots sat inside the cockpit of an aircraft that the Western world had watched closely for years, the MiG-29 Fulcrum. This was the moment that NATO and the West had been waiting for, because at last, the aircraft built to fight NATO was about to face NATO in real combat. Before the war, the MiG-29 was viewed as a mystery. Very little information about it was available. Many analysts were not even certain what would happen if it encountered the F-15 Eagle. Some believed the MiG-29 could inflict serious losses on Western air forces. Others considered it the most dangerous aircraft in the Iraqi Air Force. But once the war began, reality started to emerge. The F-15 Eagle began detecting targets from long range. AWACS aircraft were operating continuously. NATO pilots were not fighting alone. They were supported by a massive information network. Meanwhile, Iraqi MiG-29 pilots began losing support from the ground. Many radar stations were destroyed during the opening stages of the conflict. Command and control systems became increasingly disrupted. As a result, many of the MiG-29's advantages were significantly reduced. Then, the confrontation the world had been waiting for finally arrived. The MiG-29 met the F-15 Eagle, the hunter from the east against the hunter from the west. The outcome surprised many observers. Using information from AWACS and superior radar capabilities, the F-15 Eagle was often able to detect its target first, fire first, and in many cases, end the engagement before the MiG-29 pilot had an opportunity to respond. But the critical question remains: did the MiG-29 lose because it was an inferior aircraft, or was it facing an air warfare system larger and more sophisticated than anything seen before? Many analysts continue to debate this issue to this very day, because what the MiG-29 faced was not merely the F-15, it was the entire war-fighting network of NATO and the United States. And that became one of the most important lessons to emerge from the Gulf War. In the modern era, a fighter aircraft alone may no longer be enough. The winner is not always the side with the best aircraft. The winner may be the side with the best information. Yet the story of the MiG-29 was far from over. Only a few years later, it would face NATO once again, this time over the skies of Europe, in a conflict watched by the world, and in one of the most demanding tests the MiG-29 would ever face throughout its history. In the next chapter, we enter the Kosovo War of 1999. the day Serbian MiG-29s rose to intercept NATO forces, and the world witnessed another confrontation between the Fulcrum and the F-15 Eagle and F-16 Fighting Falcon once again. Eight years had passed since the Gulf War, and the MiG-29 was about to be tested once again. But this time, not over the deserts of Iraq. This time, it would be over the skies of Europe. And the opponent was not merely a coalition force, it was almost the entirety of NATO. In 1999, the conflict in Kosovo was escalating rapidly. NATO launched an air campaign against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Its objective was to pressure the Serbian government to end its military operations in the region. As the campaign began, massive numbers of NATO aircraft filled the skies. F-15C Eagles, F-16 Fighting Falcons, Mirage 2000s, Tornadoes, and numerous support aircraft. But on the other side, the Yugoslav Air Force had only a handful of assets in which it could place its hopes. One of them was the MiG-29 Fulcrum. The problem was that the Serbian MiG-29 fleet was far from being in perfect condition. Many aircraft had suffered from years of economic sanctions. Spare parts were scarce. Some electronic systems were operating below full capability. Several radar systems experienced persistent problems. Yet Serbian pilots were still ordered into the air because if they failed to intercept, their nation's skies could be completely dominated. On the first night of the war, multiple MiG-29s took off from their air bases. The pilots knew they were facing an enemy with overwhelming advantages, but they flew anyway. And the confrontation that many had anticipated finally arrived. MiG-29s against F-15C Eagles, MiG-29s against F-16 Fighting Falcons. The hunter from the east once again faced the hunter from the west. But this time, the situation was even more difficult than it had been during the Gulf War. NATO maintained continuous AWACS coverage. Electronic warfare aircraft provided support throughout the campaign. An extensive information network linked every unit together. Meanwhile, many MiG-29 pilots were forced to fight almost entirely alone. The outcome was difficult to avoid. Several MiG-29s were shot down during the opening stages of the war. Some were detected before they could detect their opponents. Others were unable to utilize their radar systems effectively. And in certain missions, the odds were overwhelmingly against them from the very beginning. Yet one aspect of the conflict continues to be discussed by military analysts even today: the courage of the pilots. Because despite knowing they were at a disadvantage, despite understanding that their opponents possessed superior technology, they still took off, and they still faced NATO. That is why the story of the MiG-29 in Kosovo continues to be studied today. After the war ended, the world began asking a question: was the MiG-29 truly a failed aircraft, or was it fighting under conditions where no aircraft could have changed the outcome? Because in many cases, victory is not determined by who can turn tighter or who can fly faster. It is determined by who sees first, who possesses better information, and who controls the skies first. But the story of the MiG-29 does not end there. Despite surviving major wars, and despite being viewed by some as defeated, the aircraft remains in service in numerous countries around the world, and it continues to enter combat zones even in the 21st century. The question is why? Why does an aircraft more than 40 years old remain in active service today? In the next chapter, we will bring together all the answers. Was the MiG-29 truly a failed aircraft in real combat? Or is it in reality one of the most misunderstood fighter aircraft in military aviation history? Throughout this episode, we have traveled back to real battlefields, from the deserts of Iraq to the skies above Europe. And the question we asked at the very beginning was simple. Did the MiG-29 ever truly face NATO? Today, we know the answer. Yes, it did. It intercepted F-15 Eagles, it confronted F-16 Fighting Falcons, and it entered battlefields watched by the entire world. But what history teaches us is that the outcome of war is not determined by aircraft alone. Early warning systems, intelligence, ground support, pilot training, and entire combat networks, all of these factors matter. The MiG-29 was not a perfect aircraft, but neither was it a weak one. When judged purely on its own capabilities, it was one of the most maneuverable fighters of the Cold War era and one of the aircraft that attracted the greatest attention from NATO, because when it first appeared, the West had no clear understanding of its true capabilities. And that is exactly why the MiG-29 became a legend in military aviation history. Even after decades have passed, even after the Soviet Union disappeared, the name Fulcrum continues to be remembered in museums, in flight academies, and among military professionals around the world, because it was an aircraft that once stood on the front line of the Cold War and one that truly faced NATO in the skies of history. But the story of the MiG family does not end here, because after the MiG-29, Russian engineers continued developing a new generation of hunters, larger, longer-ranged, capable of carrying heavier weapon loads, and designed to challenge Western air power once again. It is an aircraft many refer to as the king of the flanker family, an aircraft that NATO studied with great seriousness, and one of the most formidable fighters ever built by Russia. It is the Su-27 flanker. But the questions remain. Why did the Su-27 force NATO to develop plans specifically to counter it? What made it even more intimidating than the MiG-29? And is it true that many nations consider the Su-27 to be one of the most complete fighter aircraft ever produced by Russia? In the next episode, Eagle War Machine will take you into the story of the Su-27 flanker, the wide-winged hunter of Russia, an aircraft that once caused the Western world to take a second look with caution and respect.